Hello, Kenny. Welcome.
Welcome to you. Great to see you. How you doing?
Episode 4. How can we not be doing? Absolutely incredible.
We're doing great. And like I think I said last time, any reason to drink a glass of wine in the middle of the afternoon, midweek is reason enough to have this podcast. So thanks for allowing that.
So I was supposed to be in State College, Pennsylvania, and we are going through a blizzard now in Montreal. An April blizzard. You never know what you're going to get living in Montreal.
I saw that. That's nuts. That's not for me. That's not for me. Even this is like mid-Atlantic is not for me either, but my family's been here since the 1890s. So who am I to break that? But I saw that and like good luck to that. I didn't know that that's why you were available today, because I know that we had mentioned maybe not doing it today, and you couldn't even get out, I guess.
I figured I'd just be somewhere in one of the airports and we'd just do it while I was in the airport because I don't have to break
Right.
Chazaka now, and we can't break it.
That's right.
But I never made it out. All the planes are grounded in Montreal.
Wow.
I was supposed to be on ABC's Nightline tonight.
Wow. I did not have that on my schedule for tonight.
And Hashem had a different plan for me.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
Hey,
Wow.
Nightline podcast with Kenny. I say it's the same thing.
Shah Tova, everything in its right time.
Yeah.
So, what are you drinking? What have you had over the last week?
Oh, wow. So many good wines. But today I thought I would talk about something really, really interesting. So very often, because I'm a rabbi, people ask me questions with regards to Judaism and halacha and all different elements of Judaism and wine. Like, I love to talk about how, as part of every one of our traditions, that's the choice of using wine to celebrate. And a couple of years ago, somebody came over to me and said, you're a rabbi, not just a rabbi, you're a Chabad rabbi. You guys talk about Moshiach, though I probably don't talk about Moshiach enough to be considered a Chabad rabbi talking about Moshiach. But he said, you must have an idea that if Moshiach came right now, you would serve Moshiach which wine? Right. And I said, actually, that's a really good question, and I never thought about it. And from that moment on, no matter what the month is or the year is, and I've had to change it in the past few years but I've always had a thought in my head that if Mashiach came right now, which is the bottle that I would put on the table?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry to cut you off.
Do you have one?
I'd have to consider that for a minute. I just, that's an interesting term, Moshiach wines, and I'm not sure of this, but I feel like our friend Yossi Horowitz, the wine writer and blogger, wine critic, I think he came up with that term, Moshiach wines.
Okay.
So wines that, and it's that idea of like these wines that are the most special wines. And like I have wines, I certainly have wines in my cellar that I would consider those wines that almost, I relate it to, there's a painting in my dining room that I look at almost every Shabbos that my uncle painted. He started painting when he was, I think, in his 50s or something. Anyway, it's a painting of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and it's a really incredible painting. There's something very deep about it. It's almost like his eyes are following you a little bit. But I know that was said about him, anyways. He had those eyes. But anyway, that aside, someone, it was in my house one Shabbos, obviously we were drinking wine, and he offered me some incredible amount of money for it. I could never sell that. That has a special place to me. I have wines like that too, because one thing, it's interesting, I speak about this recently with some people, is that, I'm not that tied to that many of my wines, and you never should be. I mean, I know they're some of them, if they have an interesting story, you want to be able to appreciate that with special people, but I'm paying for tuitions right now. If someone offers me exorbitant amount of money for a bottle of wine, I'm selling it. But the bottles I wouldn't sell, I think, are the bottles that are those bottles. Those are the Moshiach wines to me. So what is it for you before I would answer what mine are?
So that's interesting that you're you're saying this is a bottle that you wouldn't sell. Like, I have bottles like that also. That if I have certain bottles somebody offered me to write, I'm paying 6 tuitions right now,
Right.
so I couldn't do exactly with a couple more dollars. But and those are wines that are very near and dear to my heart. I'm cellaring them. Some of them I've been cellaring for 15 or maybe even closer to 20 years. And I'm hoping that even though the kosher wine, and we've spoken about this a bit, that the kosher wine world doesn't have that many options for celery, there are still a few. I have an '01 Lafitte that I'm holding on to.
I hope
That
until I visit. But yes.
yes. So but I don't, when I serve Moshiach, it's like you have the greatest guest that you could think of that comes to your home, and you want to serve this guest only the best. And it doesn't necessarily, so I'll tell you why. The Lafitte may be the one I would serve, but it's not Israeli. And I feel like the Mashiach guest should get an Israeli wine. Do you agree with me on that?
I was thinking that as you were asking the question, is that I would probably, though it may not be my, necessarily, I personally, I don't have that many old Israeli wines because we can talk about this separately, but I don't feel like that for the most part, Israeli wines, at least in the last 15 years, aren't necessarily built to age 20, 30 years.
I agree with you completely. You can count on one hand how many Israeli wines you can age.
I think that's true. I think that's true. And I think even more true in the last, like I said, since about 2010, I think is the general consensus that the type of wines being produced changed to some degree, probably for business purposes, because you know what, at the end of the day, these people are running businesses and they need to sell wine, and the palate, prefers the bigger, bolder, oakier, like that kind of style. And but a lot of those wines aren't necessarily made to cellar, but more made to drink now. So I think that's very much even more so more recent, but there are like, obviously you could think of the Castel and Flam and some of these wines that are
absolutely.
Yeah.
So the one that I've chosen, so right now, if Mashiach came right now, and I would want to serve Mashiach an Israeli wine, the one that I have chosen, this bottle that I have actually is not open, it's sitting here waiting, is the Matar CB 16.
A great bottle of wine, no doubt.
So Pelter, interesting story with the Pelters. They have a flourishing, non-kosher winery. They exist, and most of them are small in Israel, but there are a few that are significant size. And Pelter, I would say, is a little of the larger boutique wineries,
right? Like in that third or fourth tier. I don't know the exact number, but it's in that third or fourth tier of winemakers. But
they've been spoken about. I think you wrote about. I saw something you wrote about them. They've been well written up as one of the better wineries in Israel, no question. And they wanted to also be part of the kosher market. And so instead of just turning their wine kosher, that's something that's a passion of theirs, and having their Pelter wines, they opened a second winery called the Matar Winery, and they produce a number of really amazing wines. Some of the medium range wines, the Stratus, the Culumus, their Petit Verdot 17, I think, is one of the best kosher wines that is on the market right now. And the CB 16 is a blend, a Bordeaux style blend for sure. I have it right in front of me. I'll tell you what it is, and we can talk about this breakdown a bit. This bottle of wine, I have, I would say, probably about 15 bottles left in my cellar of it. I open them up, I would say once every 3-4 months, I open one, and it is drinking absolutely beautifully now, like just perfect. So the wine itself is a 44% Cabernet, 44% Shiraz, 6% Cabernet Franc, and 6% Petit Verdot.
Interesting. I agree with you. I think that's a great bottle of wine, and it was one of those wineries that was not kosher for a while, but it was renowned. Winery I think of, just on the same topic, that I would love to see become kosher is Seahorse in Israel.
Yes.
not kosher, renowned. I see all the Israeli winemakers, and they all talk about it. And I'm like, man, I wish they would make. And it's actually uncommon that a more well-known winery would not produce kosher. That's the bigger wineries, starting from the fourth, fifth tiers down or up, I should say, produce kosher because also that's the marketplace. And I forget what the number is, but and I think I even said that on one of our other chats, is that the very small minority of wineries in Israel produce by far the most wine. So a lot of the non-kosher ones are very small, and can do their business that way, I guess, just with their little niche. But any larger type of it almost doesn't make sense to not produce kosher, especially something that's going to be exported to the United States, which is where it's very uncommon to find non-kosher Israeli wine in the United States. You do see it though, but there's not that much of it.
I was thinking about it. It's proof that Hebrew letters doesn't mean it's kosher.
That's right. Yeah, that gets tricky when you're traveling in Israel, right? If you're
Exactly.
relying on that hashgacha, so to speak.
No, but even if you're in the diaspora, like Seahorse is an example.
Yeah.
It has Hebrew letters on it, but it's not kosher.
Right.
And you can ask an American Jew, what do you mean it has Hebrew letters on it? How can it not be kosher?
Right. Well, as you know, I'm very interested in history and specifically Baltimore Jewish history. And this was true in any, old American city, is that the vast majority of places that may have had the word kosher in Hebrew on their door did not mean it was kosher.
Right.
Butcher shops and whatever. I mean, unless you were in the know, a place was not kosher. And I always think about that. We've come a long way since that time.
Actually, Montreal is very famous for its food, and most of the foods that it's famous for are bagels, smoked meat. I'm saying internationally, Montreal is known for kosher style food. And you have delicatessens and bagel shops all over the city here that are definitely not kosher.
What is I never really thought about it to that degree, but how did Montreal become such that place? Like, what it is, you're right, bagels and for sure meats and
smoked meats.
Yeah, why is that?
I mean, we have years ago. I remember the first time I came to Montreal, there was a big sign at the airport, Moshiach's Delicatessen, and I'm like, wow, the Montreal Jewish community really made it.
Right,
but no, Moshiach's it's not around anymore, but it was a staple here in Montreal, and it's not kosher in any shape or form.
Unbelievable, right? It's so funny.
Yeah. So there's a reason. I mean, a lot of the immigrants that came from Eastern Europe in the turn of the century to Montreal. It was a port city. It still is a port city. And a lot of Jews came here as they came to Ellis Island. And they set up shop. I mean, they needed something to do. What were they going to do? And so as a result, bagels and smoked meat and all these wonderful Jewish foods became part of the culture here.
Right. There's the old fight about which bagel is better, New York style or the Montreal style.
Oh, I'm not getting into that fight. Ours is boiled in honey water.
Right, I know. I'll say they're both great. I love
You mean the roll with the hole is also good?
Yes, exactly. Political answer. To this day, I get salamis from Montreal. They're great, and I'm coming from Baltimore, where Wasserman is one of the best in the world. So
I'm from Chicago.
That's right.
We have some of the best salamis in Chicago. Romanian.
That's an argument I love getting into, is the Romanian versus Wasserman argument.
Yeah.
I'm a loyal.
Montreal has some amazing meats, and then just the pickling and the smoked meats and the pickles.
Yeah. Well, you're talking my language. We'll have to do the kosher food podcast next. But we can integrate. Those are all my interests.
Yeah, one of the ways I became my initial stardom, that when I really catapulted into fame, was I did a show on Vice with the famous chef Matty Matheson, and I took around Montreal introducing him to kosher food. So that was my kosher food became, before wine, my initial stardom.
For those of you who haven't seen it, you should look it up. And actually, let's put it in the show notes, because it's a great watch. I remember it well. And I remember you riding a bike with him. Is that correct?
We rode a tank. Well, we had a problem. We had to wait in between milk and meat. And he's like, what are we going to do? And I said, let's go for a bike ride, man.
It was a great watch. I should rewatch it. But that's So fine. So next time I come to Montreal, smoked meats, tandem bikes. You owe me
Interesting factoid.
that.
Vice told me recently that one of their most popular pages on their website is my children's recipe.
Really?
Yeah, that came out of that show.
That's amazing. Well, what is your cholent recipe? Is it secret?
It's on Vice's website. Just look up Vice Rabbi Bernath Cholent and it'll come up.
I am not such a big cholent guy, so I hate to admit that publicly, but I've turned to the more Mediterranean style foods in my middle age, in my young middle age.
So back to wine, because this is a wine podcast.
I forgot. Yeah, so the CB Matar, great bottle of wine, and I think an interesting choice. And I guess because you have so many of them, you're really committing. I see, right?
I am for now.
For now,
I don't know what I would say. I opened up one about 3 months ago, and its window. I'm not saying it's going to hit its peak. It's definitely in its window right now. Clearly in its window.
I was going to ask you. So how much time do you think that has left in terms of like its window before? And when we say window, we mean when it will be optimally drinking before it will start falling off the cliff, so to speak, and dying. What would you say?
It's hard to say, and I know that people wine reviewers in general like to make these predictions, of which they're probably as good as a manufacturer retail price.
That's exactly right. That's why I started doing it. I'm like, who's going to prove me wrong?
Exactly.
Come back in 10 years and say you were wrong.
I mean, it's almost as good as giving it a rating, right? Which is basically 10 points, somewhere between 85 and 95.
Right. We need to discuss that at some point. That's the whole rating system is very interesting. Yes, correct. Why don't you see 40s? I know growing up that I saw 40s.
I remember years ago. I mean, the wine reviews years ago that I saw, there was 50s and 60s, no problem. Everything's 80s and 90s.
I meant my grades at school.
Oh, that's fun.
No, but it's true. It is. It's all, it begins at really 85 almost. You see, unless the wine is, particularly terrible. But so what would you say in terms of just take a shot? Again, this is, indelible. It's on the internet forever. But, I will come back and say you were wrong if you were. But that's it. It's ballpark.
I would say the last time I had it was probably January of 2024.
And how was it?
During that time, I remember it being, the fruit was large, the tannins were softening a bit. It was definitely it was drinkable, very more than approachable. It was really drinkable.
Right.
At a 16, it's 8 years old right now.
Right.
I would say that it's in its window, and my guess is going to start going downhill in probably 2026 to 2027.
I think that makes sense, and I think that's a good, basically a good advertisement for that wine because, like we said, I mean, I think 10 years of. There's the different topic of whether wine improves or not, or whether it's just cellarable that it's going to keep, but. That's a big topic itself.
Some wines are unfiltered, so they are going to continue fermenting in the bottle, or you may end up with a secondary fermentation, right? Which is another problem.
Well, it brings me to my wine.
Ooh.
Which it's like that was a perfect segue, which I'm ruining right now by talking all over it. But over the week already, I had this Chateau Marquisat de Binet, and it's called the Cuvée Abel. I don't know if anyone.
I haven't had it yet.
Those who are watching can see it. Those who are listening.
I know it just came out on the market.
Yeah. There were 2 previous kosher vintages. I think the 12 and the 14. Anyway, this is, I think, exclusive of Andrew Breskin, the liquid kosher. Anyway, an interesting thing with this wine is that I've had it a few times, and I love it. It's delicious, and it's not crazy expensive. It retails about $50. If I want to say maybe 45 to $50. So it's not cheap, but that's not terrible. But anyway, I saw, I'm always talking wine, and I've seen people recently there's been some chatter that it was dying, and I couldn't believe that, having tasted it a few times I went back and opened it this Shabbos. I think I opened it for Friday night, and I immediately confirmed what I thought was going on. So what I smelled was what I think to be Brettanomyces,
Mm.
so, which is referred to as Brett, shortened as Brett, and is an interesting topic. It's an interesting, it's a yeast. But my point is that I think people were confusing that aroma, which is often the aroma of like a Band-Aids and barnyard. And there's different, it really depends because it can manifest itself in different ways. But that kind of barnyard, if you want to call it that. Now, barnyard also is also referred to when it's an older wine, because that is a well-known what's called a tertiary aroma of wine, and that's from bottle aging. That a wine sits in your cellar for 20 years. Really great wine is going to start to develop a different set of aromas. Like a pleasant.
It brings funky to a new level.
Yes, exactly. And and I don't think everyone enjoys that. My wife doesn't enjoy that. Every time this specific one, I'm like, I gave her the glass, and right away she's like, barnyard. I don't like it. And there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people don't like that aroma, and that they want fruit. They want fresh fruit. They want, and the vast majority of wines you're going to drink, that's what you're going to smell, and that's what wines are built for the most part, is that real fresh fruit, primary aromas. But the greatest wines in the world, and are really you can appreciate, if you do appreciate that, you're going to get all those tertiary notes from just sitting in a bottle for many years. And there's a similar kind of nose to Brettanomyces or Brett, as applied to, like, as if you would relate it to a tertiary aroma of wine that's really aged. So I think people are confusing that nose. And so what Brett is that it's a yeast. It's a cousin of Saccharomyces, which is the main yeast used to ferment wine. The difference is that it's very often can lead to, it's kind of controversial, actually. Like someone like me, when I get this in a wine, a touch of this, and I think it's a touch of it in this wine, it's not like overwhelming. I find it really enjoyable, and I find it like it lends a complexity to the nose and to the experience you have with the wine. But a lot of people may not like it. So in certain parts of like France, I think in the south of France, it's almost like allowed. Now, what it is that it's a yeast that has to get into the winery somehow. Once it's there, you can't get rid of it. Really, it's hard to get rid of, I should say. One method of getting it out of wine, if it's already in the winemaking process, is through sterile filtration, like you were discussing filtration. But some winemakers, especially ones that are like more like natural about their winemaking, okay, you may have it. And like I said, it can get in from, once it's in the barrels, it's there forever. It's going to be in those barrels.
They could get new barrels.
They could get new barrels, right? But even in the winemaking equipment, it's in everything. Once it's in that winery, it's very hard to really eradicate.
I mean, a lot of the winemakers like that wild fermentation. Right. They like to do it, and that's part of the joy of kind of the old. We used to say in Chicago, when you play basketball, you got to work with the court,
right?
It's wherever you are.
That's right.
And aficionados actually prefer that barnyard funk, right, or that kind of aged experience.
Absolutely. It doesn't mean you're wrong if you don't like it, though. But it's just a distinct, I think it was a really interesting distinction between understanding the aroma of bread versus that tertiary aroma that comes with old wine. Right. That was probably really boring. And there's a lot more real geeky information about bread. And I find the wine faults in general, just something that we both learned about when we were taking our courses, to be interesting also, and to be able to identify them and understand what a flaw is versus, just something that a wine may age into is important, understanding wine to some degree.
Right. And sometimes we even know in the winemaking process that sometimes the flaw actually becomes the signature of the wine, and people really enjoy it.
It could be. And that's, I think, the case with this wine. I love this wine. I think it's really delicious. And another point to make about this is that I've had this open this Thursday now. This is open for almost 7 days, and it smells incredibly fresh. So that is immediate identify that it's not dying at all. It's very much, I think it's actually still developing.
Would you say that has something to do with bread? Like, do you think that yeast affected it to the point where it does stay fresh longer?
I've never read that. I'm not familiar with that idea. Like, very well could be, but I don't think so. I think maybe it has more to do with the winemaking style. And I know that the winemaker, I forget his name, Christophe something. And he's, of course, his flagship or very well-known wine is Rose's Camille, which I'm sure have seen also, which is far more expensive. All his wines, yeah, amazing bottle, and but all these wines have that little signature, little bit of Brett to it, I think, and that's something.
And that's a good example. In the Rose's Camille, I actually just opened an 11 this week. A Rose's Camille 11. Somebody brought it over to my house, and it had that bread, and it's just everything. The Barnyard Funk was really strong, and those bottles are everything you want in an amazing fresh one.
I agree, and that's still a young wine, that 11 Rose. Anyway, this was, I think, an interesting exercise just for me to, identify, to go in thinking like maybe it is kind of, getting to the end of its life. And no, I see very much it's not. It's just distinctly that Brett knows. So anyway, it's a great bottle of wine. And
one of the things that I as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking that it's the kosher consumer in general. And this is something that I think is indicative of, I think, a lot of our audience is that, we can't expect the kosher consumer to be that sophisticated at this point because we haven't had that many options. And this wine is a good example of a new option that exists if you want something that is going to be approachable and open your palate to a different taste that's not just large fruit or the Cabernet that everybody knows so well. Like, that's what you expect almost when you open a kosher bottle of wine. There, in the world of wine aficionados, there's a lot of different tastes that we look for, and this is a good example of one of them that is not readily available.
I think that's a great idea. I love that idea. I think it's very true, and that's why, as the kosher wine world keeps expanding and we get different, Sauvignon Blanc from California is going to taste very different than Sauvignon Blanc from France, or that you really, there are certain grapes we may only have one example of them, if any, but that's one. You're right, is that to be able as a wine aficionado to be able to experience one versus the other is such a great exercise and such a great educational tool for wine.
Yeah, I would say if you want to start getting into wine, just find a bottle of kosher wine that you've never seen that great before and experience it. Experience a Nebbiolo, experience there's a Barolo that's just coming out now. There's very few kosher Barolos in the market. If you see it in the wine shop and you're like, I don't know what that is, it's probably because there aren't many of them around. Cabs, you can get cabs from anywhere. Right. Merlots, you can get Merlots, Shiraz, you can get that from anywhere. But some of these other more intricate wines, I think, are a good way to start expanding your palate.
Agreed. That's what no matter what level you're on, you're always aiming for, right?
Yeah.
So, Rabbi, I had a different thing I was thinking about, actually, since last week. And
I just called me Rabbi.
Well, there's your rabbinical insight may be useful here, I think.
Okay. That's why I heard Rabbi. I'm like, oh no.
Is that ever followed by? It's followed by good things too, I'm sure. When people say Rabbi. Well, here it is. So a listener sent me in something, and he said, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this. This is I've been learning with my Sabrosa for 36 years or some number like that. They're both old friends of mine. And he sent me this idea from Masechta Shabbos, and I wanted to read a little bit of it.
Oh.
And
is it Gemara and wine?
It is Gemara and wine. Yes, how did you know? So the idea is that the line here is, it says, in the Gemara, it says, I'll read it in English: proclaiming wine and life to the mouths of the rabbis is not considered an Amorite practice, since it's merely meant as a blessing. So you're probably familiar with this Gemara. I was not, unfortunately. But the bottom of the article has a really interesting insight. It says, Gemara says that Rabbi Akiva offered this toast wishing wine and life to the rabbis and their students. As noted in Note 1, this association of wine with life resembles the prevalent custom of proclaiming l'chaim on drinking wine. Yeah, all right. So that's already interesting.
Let's put this into context.
Yes.
The idea of saying l'chaim at a toast is at least 1,900 years old.
Right. That's itself a great point.
Yeah.
Wow.
So when you're saying l'chaim, just think about the generations that you're connecting to when you say l'chaim.
I thought it came from Fiddler on the Roof, personally, but
even that's already 50 years old.
It's right. That's amazing. What a point that is. Several commentators explain that wine is often associated with sadness and mourning. Wine was used to disorient a condemned man before his execution, as it says in Sanhedrin. The sages also recommend using it to console a mourner, also from Sanhedrin. The Gemara there likewise notes that nothing brings wailing, in quotes, to man as wine in its intoxicating destructiveness. So interesting.
I think there's a Mishnah that says if man drinks wine, the essence comes out. And this must yain necessary.
Right.
That
Exactly.
when you drink, the essence comes out.
Right, good or bad.
Yes.
We are thus accustomed to announce to life before partaking of wine, declaring this wine to bring life rather than death.
Wow.
And one last thing, Maharal notes that the Torah often associates intoxicating beverages with the cup of punishment. Thus, at times such as parties, when excesses are common, giving an opening to the accusing angel, we announce that we're drinking for life.
So saying l'chaim is literally differentiating ourselves.
That's right. Which we always do.
Wow.
And it's another, I thought this was just, wow, what an insight. And I was not aware of this. It actually goes a lot further. I'm not going to read all of it, but there's, where I just wanted to read this last thing. It says, Das Sikinim and Rav Yosef Mordechai Kahana, I had to skip the page, both explain that according to one opinion in Brachos, that the tree of knowledge was actually a grapevine.
Mm-hmm.
Wine thus brought death into the world. It's an interesting idea. I mean, think about that. That's itself an interesting idea. We therefore assert that the wine we drink now should be a source of life rather than death.
So that's a prevalent idea.
That the tree of knowledge was a
right. So that I would say within rabbinic writings, that's quite prevalent.
Right.
The idea that the tree of knowledge was a grapevine, and that Adam and Eve ate. It wasn't an apple. Sorry, Michelangelo. It definitely wasn't an apple. Michelangelo put it there because he liked the red fruit.
Right.
But it could have been an etrog. It could have been a fig. There's different opinions, but the prevalent opinion is that it was a grapevine.
Right. Right, but that idea is, and I think what you said about that, how we distinguish ourselves in that level, but it's such an interesting thing, and we mentioned it before, that wine has the capability of good and evil, as we know from the Torah.
Mm-hmm.
The last line in this, and there's a couple of paragraphs more, but the last line says, Rav Yosef Mordechai Kahana, citing Yismach Moshe, said that we wish each other l'chaim when drinking wine, to say that this should lead to divrei Torah and life rather than empty words of intoxication and death.
I love that.
Yeah, great.
I've always thought about this with regards to the way that a lot of people drink. Like, think about pubs, the Irish pubs, and like it's always been like this. You walk in and it's grungy, and like it's the alcohol consumption has always been one that has been considered something of not proper. But wine has always been at the table of kings and nobles, and always considered a refined drink. And so by us elevating it and blessing it and saying l'chaim to it, it's part of that process of elevation. I love how he says at the end that it brings us to an interesting conversation instead of maybe a conversation about things that should not be spoken about.
Correct. I think Purim, which we just passed, is a perfect example of the Suda and uplifting and Divrei Torah and singing, which is what we aim for, even when we're drinking potentially excessively.
Beautiful. Thank you for bringing that. I had not thought of that Talmud in quite a while, and it's such a beautiful, beautiful explanation that they brought there.
Yeah, it was thanks to Jeff Cohn and Eli Schlossberg, my friends, for sending that to me, and encourage anyone to send us these ideas. Yeah.
Please, if you have anything like that, please send. That's fascinating, and I think this is a good opportunity for us to say L'chaim.
Chaim, Chaim.
L'chaim. Hashem should bless that from our mouths and the drinking of wine and the discussion of wine should bring good and good tidings. Not only good tidings, but I can't help but think about the hostages and how difficult things are for them, and I hope to be able to celebrate with them. And we were talking earlier about Moshiach, but you know what? If the hostages come out, I'll open a bottle of Matar CB with pleasure.
Amen.
Kenny, good speaking with you today.
Great to see you. Great to speak with you. I guess good luck on getting wherever you're going next. But look forward to next time we speak.
Absolutely. And to all of you, if you have any comments, questions, kosherwinepodcast@gmail.com. We're waiting for your emails. We're happy to read them on air with or without your name. You can just write anonymous if you don't want us to mention your name. And we'd love to hear your feedback, ideas, comments, death threats, whatever you got.
Chaim.